Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dawn of Yang Chen chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 38, which is called Reconciling. So we are in wrap-up basically on the book now. Last 4 chapters are all wrapping up in a way, something or another. In this case, it's the last chapter where we get to see Yang Chen and Kavik speak to each other, and of course the betrayal of Kavik has to be discussed here, and how does Yang Chen feel about that? And it's going to be a very interesting one in terms of like the main character dynamics going into the next book, Yang Chen's feelings on the matter, how Kavik feels about it. It feels like what they do here is like, okay, Yang Chen is hurt at the betrayal right now, but it feels like we could get back to a point where it's Avatar and companion again, but stuff needs to happen in the next book to get to that point. Kavik needs to do a lot more to sort of prove himself once again. So we open the chapter here with Kavik basically just waiting for Yang Chen to, in a way, like come back after the events of the previous chapter. They were working together nicely on the mission, but he knows that the truth needs to be talked about in all of this. So it's fine initially. It's a little bit like just kind of like simple the way they're talking to each other so far. They're just like, you know, no wig, Jujinta, and it's like, okay, a risky recruitment, but it ended up working out. And Kavik just notes that, yeah, I managed to like kind of in a way turn him onto our side. And Kavik thinks of this as kind of like a true like manipulation of Jujinta, which it's a bit of a weird one in that like ultimately, yes, he just wanted to sort of use Jujinta on the mission, but I think getting him in touch with the Avatar helped him, especially because the impression I have of whatever incident happened is probably that it's not as like egregiously terrible as maybe it's made out to be, but I'm assuming we will get more on that as we go forward. Because interestingly, Yang Chen does say, well, I have a new companion now, whether I wanted one or not. So it seems like Jujinta is now sort of like included with Akudan and Taegum as sort of just like, yeah, they're now loyal. These are the people who are loyal to the Avatar. So it seems like Yang Chen has a new person she can kind of go to if she needs his help. So that's quite interesting. And yeah, she just knows that everyone else is safe. Then comes the message. What about the message I sent to you in Port Tugok? Yang Chen pulls it out and reveals that I missed it in Port Tugok, but the Hawk came back to Bin when it was unable to deliver. That's how I had it. Boma gave it to me. And this is where we get the reveal that, like, oh yeah, what Kavik wrote in it was not just the information to help the plan work, but he did confess to betraying her in this message as well. It says here, he burned himself. So he burned basically his out. And Yang Chen even notes that, like, you didn't need to send this message. You could have let the situation play out. I would have never discovered you turned on me, and we would have still taken down Unanimity in Bin together. And I suppose it's just a case of like Kavik being honest, but because of how much of a breach of Yang Chen's trust this is, she doesn't even, in a way, see the sincerity of him just coming clean in the first place, because she thinks this might be part of some other ploy that sort of he has in place. She really right now doesn't really feel like she knows what to make of him and how much she ever trusted him in the first place. It's very interesting, like just how hurt Yang Chen is by this. Understandably so. Of course, in that he didn't have to do this, and obviously we'll get to the more sort of emotional aspect of this overall. So Kavik's like, what about the others? Do they know? Do you want me to tell them? And he says yes, he does want them to know. But Yang Chen says, I need you to understand something. When you sided with your brother over me, gave me the runaround, and threw away our chance to stop Unanimity from reaching Bin you unleashed the worst sort of information possible. You created a ripple that cannot be smoothed. A small man like Zhongdu Honsha did this to his own city for money. I suppose I should be grateful that he and Chai Si have known loyalties other than through themselves. If someone like the Earth King got their hands on it, and she just notes that behind closed doors, the leaders of the four nations are still at each other's throats. Tensions are ready to be inflamed by the slightest spark. If they knew a human being outside of the Avatar could possess such extreme power, they'd do anything to control it. The world itself might combust. So that's the real threat of all of this. That she's sort of in a way accepting the idea that Honsha was never really, for the most part, going to just go on a rampage and kill the people of Bin-Ur because he needed the city to make money. But worse than that is it getting here and us even allowing Honsha and to even activate his plan in the first place, making unanimity public, is the worst thing that could have happened. If the plan had worked earlier and they intercepted it before it arrived, no one would have ever found out what it is. And that's good. Whereas now, there's this public incident of people know that some sort of an explosive weapon was used to hold off the Earth King's army and lay siege to Bin-Ur, basically. And that information is going to get to all the other world leaders. And we know the Earth King is a very harsh, kind of brash leader who you never know what he's going to do. If he was to find out what would actually happen, that's the threat that's being talked about here. And I really like that as like, this is what it's about. Like, the incident that has just passed, like, is over. It's more about who knows what. That's actually the more important thing overall. And she then says that Kavik just says, I understand. You know what the worst part of this is, Yang Chen says. In the moment you decide to come clean, some part of me knows you were uncompelled. My inner voice, mine, is telling me you had no ulterior motive, that you were simply being honest with me for the first time. And I can't afford to listen to that voice. There's a chance you're manipulating me still. You might have only told me about your brother because you want my help extracting him from Chai Si's organization. And obviously we get a little bit of Kavik's perspective here where he says, like, he honestly didn't believe that. But now that she's explained it that way, he is aware that after what's happened, he can't exactly say otherwise and properly defend himself there and make Yang Chen believe that, because the trust between them is kind of shattered at this point. And it's again noted that, like, Kalyan is in more danger now than he probably was before. Kavik's actually relatively safe in all of this, but now he's more in danger from Chai Si than anything. So that is an interesting point. I can't take you at face value anymore. You've denied me that luxury. I can't even trust your confession, Kavik. He asked a few questions, but basically, in her mind, I can't tell you what I've done with the Firebenders. I can't tell you what I've done with Honsha. You know, you've lost that privilege of getting all of the information. And then he's like, what are you going to do with me? And she says, what am I going to do with you? I'm not sure yet. But you don't have to worry. With all the information in your head and all the ways you're connected, you're more valuable than you ever were before. And she just says, I made a mistake in trusting you, Kavik. You're not one of my companions, but you still might be one of my assets. And that's how the chapter ends. And that is the last Kavik and Yang Chen scene in the book. We get, obviously, Yang Chen on her own in, like, the next couple of chapters, and then Kavik is the last chapter. But in terms of those two speaking to each other, that is it for the book. And a very interesting way to do it. After so much of the book is spent setting up their dynamic and how good it is, Kavik has the potential to be this amazing companion. The book ends with Yang Chen saying, you're not one of my companions, but she kind of has to use him as an asset. Now, how much we really read into that is going to be an interesting one when we get to the events of kind of the chapters coming up. In that, does it just mean that she is aware that he has useful skills and so she will use him when needed? But the idea of, like, she will sort of, like, be with him a lot of the time. He can fly her bison. That aspect of things, that's gone. the more friendship aspect of this is gone, and he has, in a way, because of the lack of trust, forced it to be much more of a business situation. In a way, like it was in the first place, the whole idea of they created this sort of deal, I'll hire you on as an errand runner. It's almost like we've gone back to that situation. Whereas there were scenes earlier on in the book, like out at Tiger Dillo's Roar, out at the beach and stuff like that, where there were these clear emotional moments between the two where you really saw that this is a key dynamic. Like, Yang Chen, I think, needs someone around her who's her own age, who she can have that kind of fun banter with. And I think you can tell that Kavik has also needed someone like that as well. They do ultimately both help each other. And that's why I do think that, like, even though Yang Chen right now is very hurt by what has happened, justifiably so, I think overall we need to get to a point where she will be able to sort of forgive him to a certain extent, because I think those two are better having each other as friends than having none of the friendliness in their dynamic. Is not a good thing, I think. But I think it's more up to Kavik to kind of prove himself worthy once more than anything else. There's maybe a slight sense that this is Yang Chen maybe being a little bit too business-like, in that, like, it is one of the first times that it's actually brought up among the two of them that, like, you know, Kalyan is Kavik's brother, and like she doesn't really in any way, I suppose, factor in that like, oh, you were in a tight situation, you were guilt tripped into it, or anything like that. Because from Yang Chen's perspective, you understand that Kavik choosing his brother over her put the world at risk, and he gets that. So, you know, it's an interesting situation. It's complicated, but it's interesting. That it means that if they do have a reunion in the next book, there's an excitement around it, because it's not going to just be business as usual. There'll be a tension between the two of them, and then you wonder, like, oh, what incident in a way might bring them back together, given that by the looks of things we're going to be doing somewhat similar stuff to this book, but getting deeper into the mystery. So we'll see what happens there. But you know, good chapter. Kavik realizing, you know, that this is ultimately the way things were going to go. He doesn't try to defend himself here because he knows he did wrong. So interesting stuff. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. Other than that, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.